So my experience with storytelling comes from early childhood. My father is a natural storyteller, so he told me many stories when I was a child, ranging from cowboy and Indian stories to all kinds of other things he made up on the fly. And so later on, the first real experience with professional storytellers was in the U.S. when I was doing my PhD in Pittsburgh in Carnegie Mellon, and there was a local storytelling club ran by the Pittsburgh Storytelling Society for that purpose. And one of the people in there was actually a person with Irish roots. His name was Joe Healy, and he was an ex-Jesuit, and he came to the storytelling club, and he was super nice to me. I was a fresh student, arrived in America, didn't know anything, and then I saw him perform at one point in Celebration, which was a big event in Pittsburgh where professional storytellers would come on stage and present their work, and the room was packed. It was a massive audience, and had been running for many years. And Joe Healy came up with one of the stories that I still tell now, which is the Dune story. It's one of my favorite stories, and so I kept an interest in it. And then, of course, when I moved to Ireland, it was amazing. There was such a big storytelling tradition still ongoing with local clubs and Cape Clear International Storytelling Festival. And I also, then the Gap got created, which is a marvelous event, and there are the yarn spinners in Cork, and so I kind of got roped in there, and then have been doing that regularly ever since. Yeah, I think storytelling stays the same in a sense. I mean, good storytelling is in good books, in good films, in podcasts. I think what has changed a lot is the amount of time that children and adults spend on screen. And even if you listen to stories in a movie or in a book, I think the online experience is not quite the same, and I wish there was more time for children to experience real storytelling. And I'm sure some parents still do it, but I think it's less and less because of this problem with everybody being on screens. And my sister, who works in childcare, told me recently children are not even used to playing outdoors anymore. It depends really where you're looking. Children are different in different places, but it's a worrisome development that, and I think storytelling is brilliant for the development of children. If you tell a child a story, they visualize it, and it goes on in their head, and they're really in it and living with it. And if they tell stories themselves as well, it creates something. So it's an interplay between creativity and analytical side in a child. And there are many stories about famous scientists who got storytelling from an early age and developed creativity and analytical skills later on. So one of the examples is Marie Curie, who had, I don't remember who it was, an uncle or whoever it was in the family, told her many stories, and she told many stories early on. And she's a person who's extremely analytical if you look at the history of her development. But I think the creative side of storytelling helps with making new discoveries. And so I think storytelling is vital, and I hope we find a way to kind of rein in a little bit the amount of time children and people are on screens. I'm one of them. And then get the impact of traditional storytelling again in some form. If I had to imagine what storytelling looked like in the future, I would think that 3D projection would be an amazing possibility. So if you have characters walking around, and maybe some of them could be artificial storytellers and some could have been real storytellers, the story would come alive. But I think part of the drawback is, again, you have to have storytelling on its own. Just the words make people imagine things, and that imagination is so crucial. So I'm not sure what could be developed in the future. I wish I knew what could be developed in the future that would have the effect early on of making people imagine things by themselves. And I'm hoping that technology can sort of mix the best of both worlds, that they would imagine things by themselves and be challenged through the interactivity, and maybe that could sort of lead to something beautiful in the future. I have no idea otherwise. Yeah. Part of what I try to do is mix storytelling with teaching and with science. And so one of the things that I do in my classes is I tell, for instance, the story of the wizard who is asked to make a stone that they can't lift. And so if the wizard is all powerful, they should be able to create such a stone. But if they're able to create a stone, then they can't lift it, and there's something else they can't do. So it's sort of something that I use in when I teach computer science about a famous problem called the halting problem, where a program has to predict whether other programs terminate or not. And so basically, the way you show that it can't be done is by giving the program a stone that it can't lift, which in this case is its own program that it needs to predict whether it stops or not. So it's kind of fun to weave it into storytelling. And the Dune story is another story where a bunch of wise men and a bunch of thieves and robbers meet and can't communicate, and they use sign language. And when they walk away at the end of the story, they each have a completely different interpretation of what happened. And in science, it's often like that. We look at this new thing that we don't know about, and we come up with theories, and often there are competing factions that have a very different take on it. For instance, in physics, is light a wave, or is it a straight particle that moves? So it could be both. And Niels Bohr once said that sometimes the opposite of a profound truth is once again a profound truth. Now, that's not the case in the case of the story, but I like to use those stories to illustrate science. And once you hear a story, you never forget. I never forget stories that my teachers told. I forgot many other things. So.
You have been listening to The Digital Hearth.